Hi everybody, welcome to this panel. Ooh, how's this sounding? Kinda scratchy. Maybe I'll hold it from here. Okay, I'm Will Robinson, I'm the moderator today. My goal will be to talk as little as possible and hand it off to these fine professional founders here who know what they're doing and give them some coverage. So why don't we just start by having everybody introduce themselves and their project. Let's do 45 seconds about you and 30 seconds about your project. Don't bore anybody. Go ahead. Left to right.
Okay. Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, being an anon is cool and shit until you have to put on one of these masks. It's terrible. Like, you can see them. Yeah, it's the worst. Anyway, I'm Lord Pemberton Squigglebop. I'm the chief retard over at EAT. We are a thermonuclear gigaponzi built on Verichain. It's not funny, I'm serious. And yeah, I wouldn't check it out, but I'll pass it over.
Hey everybody, Nirav Murthy, one of the co-founders of Camp Network. We are a modular identity layer where we aggregate online social data and enable users to monetize their identities while helping teams find a long-term community and product market fit. Based out of New York, I see a lot of familiar faces, and thank you to all the hosts today.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan. I'm one of the co-founders at Cyber, previously known as Cyber Connect. Started in 2021. We're a social graph protocol, raised 25 million from Multicoin, and right now Cyber is mostly building L2 for social applications. So if you're a developer, come find us. We can help you build good social apps.
GM homies, my name is Evan McMullen, founder of Disco.xyz. Thank you to our host today for putting a disco ball up top so I feel at home. We believe you guys are the multifaceted center of the party, just as you are, reflecting many parts of your identity to the world, however you decide. So whether you roll OP stack or ARB, ETH, L1 or beyond, we support data backpacks that carry all of the stuff you need beyond what is contained in your wallet from app to app. We've also built out the on-chain phone book. It's a list of businesses on-chain that can help you understand and identify different types of reputation. Super excited to be here today. Came on-chain full-time in 2017, but first got excited about Bitcoin a little over 10 years ago when I was an undergrad. Nolan, great to see you. Friend from school here. We're still here. So excited to learn more about what the builders are up to today.
Hey, thanks everybody. I'll just introduce myself for some minimal credibility. I work at Alliance. I'm a mentor there. We're an accelerator for early stage crypto projects. If you're building something in crypto, please apply at Alliance.xyz. Before that, I did a PhD in video game design, so if you want to talk about video games with me, I'm really into it. But my first question is for the Yeeter over there. I actually think smooth UX might be a problem for you. I think people really want to feel like they're early and with going through a lot of friction in order to make money in their Ponzi quickly. How do you feel about bad UX as something that's good for go-to-market?
I think that's very interesting. I think the way we think about this, we think about UX in two different ways. So technical, of course, which we do want to be smooth. I can elaborate on why. And also cultural. So cultural UX is where we add a lot of friction here. So using terminology and self-branding, for example, as a thermonuclear gigaponzi, is not very accessible to people, who aren't already super down the rabbit hole, right? And like already lost. So in this sense, people who are very crypto native coming across a protocol that describes itself this way, already feel like, hey, this really connects with facets of the culture I enjoy, this is funny, blah, 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 whatever. And I feel crypto native just being involved in this kind of community or this kind of project. So that's the way we add friction. And in that sense, I really agree that adding friction is a very good method for go-to-market and onboarding people. As for technical UX, we do try to make it very smooth, but I think the reasons why are more mid-curve, and you guys all know them, right? So yeah, I'd say that's how we add friction.
I'll let any of you guys respond to whether you ever think friction is useful, or we can move on to my next question.
I think you make a really great point that when your objective is a Ponzu, you got to be careful that you don't get too many users in the top, right? Ponzus do not work for 1 billion people. And so having intentional, exclusionary design choices to focus on the bags that you want and nothing that you don't, I think is a great way to engage a tiny TAM in a very intentional and, relatable manner. But again, we've got a cultural barrier that is optimal for unscalable experiences, but extraordinary and productive in those smaller circumstances.
Yeah, the last thing I'll add here is obviously the whole goal of today is talking about how to smooth UX to onboard the next 100 million users to the blockchain in general. The more rough your user experience is, the more engaged your community actually is as well. Because to your point, it feels like they've gone through so much that they actually earn the reward, that they become the ultimate shillers, to say the very least. And so the minute that you have that engaged community, nothing really else matters when you're sort of running that type of business. So I think everything that Lord said makes a ton of sense.
All right, my next question for you guys is about progressive onboarding. So I see a lot of apps in crypto that before I can even look at them require my wallet and for me to connect it. And it just feels like lazy UX. It feels like I should be able to do a lot before I give you the keys to everything. And how do you guys think about that?
Sure. Danger, Will Robinson. That's a lot of entitlement for a user. I feel like I hear you that we want to be able to enjoy, various capabilities, but the demand or rather the moment of providing data about yourself as a user, whether that's your public key or something else, that amount of data is the extent to which the app can personalize your experience. And so until you have that moment of connectivity where you are putting forth data about your own identity, you are enjoying the same web page as everybody else, which might as well be static. Now, the UX can get nasty on some sites where you literally cannot click through anything until you have this aggressive pop-up in the front. But that's pretty similar to a lot of the ways that our apps in Web2 are designed because of the KPIs of success that those apps want to report on. Number of unique users, number of unique addresses. And so I blame subservience to metrics for this UX friction, and I would disagree a little bit. Like, bad app experiences don't make me love apps. If I try to use an app and it doesn't work 3 or 4 times, it doesn't make me want to call the team and hang out with them and tell them how much I loved that experience, So I also, want to note that I think the ability to survive bad UX and then come out on the other side feeling good about it means you have to have gotten paid, laid, into a party you wouldn't have gotten into otherwise, made some friends who make you look cool, let you posture on the internet in a way that you couldn't otherwise. And so the externalized benefits have to be there because I refuse to make the argument that bad UX is something we should aspire to.
Fully agree on the bad UX. What I meant more so is when you have a very hyper-niche project, then the community aspect comes into play. To double down on what Evan said, and this is something we've discussed pretty extensively, I think the key is no real blockchain apps today are tailored to the actual user. And the whole reason for that is the lack of identity and the lack of data that we see overall. You think about the most popular Web2 apps in the world, most of those require you to sign in from the point of, or sign up from the point of, landing page at some point. Otherwise, it's like they just keep knocking you with pop-ups over and over. I agree that's a broader problem in Web2 as it relates to, having to hit these retention metrics and whatnot. But I think the future of Web3 apps gets better and better as you're able to actually refine and continue to test, and usually that requires some sort of sign-in from the early days. Having said that, the UX in general has just got to be way better when it comes to the one-click sign-ins, as opposed to a lot of, we've sort of lost a lot of the composability recently, especially, I think the last talk was about sort of how many chains we have, and that's something that needs to be better in the future.
Well, on that topic of all those chains, for you, Ryan, I mean, it is painful, the number of chains we have. I have to swap with my MetaMask 4 or 5 times an hour to parade around crypto. And here I have another chain now that I'm going to have to deal with. How do you reconcile the future of UX with so many chains?
I think it comes from two directions. One is from the very infrastructure players out there. Like we are, Cyber is part of the superchain, the OP superchain. So we're adopting to one of the stacks out there, and hopefully they will be working very hard to push forward to the interop, where all the chains are seen by a user as one single chain, so different chains, and they don't really need to bridge or do the cross-chain swaps and transactions. And from the other direction is really providing better UX. I was just going to add on, like Cyber has been working on a lot of different initiatives on better UX. So we have our own Cyber wallet, which is a multi-chain, multi-VM wallet, one of the largest deployed account tracking wallet out there. And we have a lot of experiences building social apps that users don't have to give away their addresses or connect their wallets when they first land on it. They have various ways to build apps that users can enjoy a little bit of it and gradually gets to embed a wallet and then maybe bring their own keys or maybe even export their keys to somewhere else. So I think it comes from either from the app developers building better UX or from the infrastructure providers really uniting on a couple of stacks and bringing that interop by default.
You want the superchain to save your bacon?
Yeah, so Cyber is bidding on the superchain, OP superchain. We're working with them pretty extensively on that. And also, as I said, Cyber Wallet is building user experience on that front and with our apps as well. They're all multi-chain apps.
So when I was learning about Disco and Camp, they both look like identity solutions where UX was going to be solved by knowing more about the user. Is that right to understand? And how do you tackle that problem differently? Like, why do we have a Camp and a Disco? What are they
Totally.
doing?
Well, we are so glad that the Camp guys came to the party. Welcome to the Identity Squad. It's been wonderful to be able to provide some, context and insight to help guide their journey. Camp is, and I'll, invite more details from the source himself. But having, being an L2 part of the OP stack is very different than being an application layer that aggregates, indexes and aggregates, computes on data from across the EVM. So Disco is protocol agnostic. We play nicely across the stacks, and we make it straightforward to logically centralize data around users that comes from many different places, both on-chain and off. We see our role as sort of sitting above stacks such as Camp and our other colleagues to help create a more holistic picture of who an audience is. Not only what assets they own, but also what time are they awake, which, who's into snowboarding, like what groups or organizations do they know, who knows each other, who is legit in the eyes of exchanges that we like and trust, etc. And so we see the importance of protocols as a trust minimized execution environment for these statements to be made. And then at Disco, with our data backpacks, the on-chain phone book, and our dashboards, these are tools that make that data friendly, useful, actionable for folks who don't write code, but want to be given directions on how to lower customer acquisition costs, increase the smooth interaction with app developers, and decrease friction with chain developers. And I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Evan. Number one, Camp Schiller, of course. No, I think she said it exactly right. We sort of sit in two different parts of the stack. We as the chain, them as the application layer on top. What I think for us, what we really cared about was when we look at the broader application landscape, it's very difficult to find product market fit because there candidly is just like a lack of data on any of the users that we see. And when you look at Web2, or like just a broader online time, everybody spends way more time in Web2 than in Web3 in general. On things like Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. And I think the reason for that is because the products have gone through such long life cycles when it comes to logging in, alpha testing, beta testing, refining, going through that tailored experience, that you're able to go through these like long cycles of feedback loops that really enable really successful product development. We candidly haven't seen that as much in Web3, and I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. One of them being the really short-term attention spans of most of the consumers that lead to quick token launches, leads to airdrops and really external validation or external reward mechanisms that make it very difficult to build a long-term sustainable project because the cost of staying on one project is so high when you can theoretically airdrop farm across everything else. And so what we see at Camp is how can we bring that Web2-like experience and how can we bring those Web2 communities into Web3 to let those apps create long-term product market fit. And the ultimate goal is instead of having sort of farmers, we have campers who want to stay in our ecosystem and in our app ecosystem over time as well.
Got it. This next one's for Lord Pemberton. So you've been building for consumers now for some time, and I'm wondering what lessons you've uncovered from building consumer-facing product in Web3.
I think one of the main takeaways has been just make it as simple as possible. I don't think like I'm blowing any minds here, but make it as simple as possible, so even if you're as retarded as can be, all you need to see is like one big yellow button, one big yellow or whatever color call to action. That even though there may be complex like financial mechanisms under the hood, you want to abstract that away, make it as easy as possible for people to grok what the outcome they are seeking should be, or make that as explicit as possible. Like, hey, if you do this, you can make some money. Woo! How that happens, how the sausage is made in the middle, just abstract as much away as possible. Maybe that's not so much a new learning per se. I'd say maybe a new one we have learned is that actually if you tell people they're retards or they're stupid, like they will love that for whatever reason. I mean, we think it's hilarious and we verbally abuse people every day and they go, woo! So that's been a learning. Yeah, so not the app itself, UX, but like UX external to the app and around it, which has been very interesting to see and also fun.
Thanks. Okay, anybody want to respond to that? Verbally abusing your customers?
I think the good Lord over here has made a great point that user-centered design for community engagement is important. What works for your users may not work for other people's users. And so being familiar with what your audience will vibe with, how they are comfortable being addressed, what they appreciate, may differ from protocol to protocol. So for example, if I were to take the cheap retard strategy to the Bank of International Settlements, where I was meeting with European central bankers last week, they may not have responded in such a positive way. However, like having a little joyfulness, a little empathy for the experience of the human behind the keyboard, I think is really the core of what I want to take from that comment. Now, show of hands, how many of y'all have interacted with a wallet recently and it kind of stressed you out? Like you didn't feel 110% confident, you were like maybe double checking those characters, looking at the first and last in your address, sweating a little bit. Yeah, that's weird, guys, right? We are supposed to be the most confident, the most expert. How on earth could we possibly invite the people across the street from us to join this party if we can't even feel comfortable in our own seats here on a day when we are supposed to be celebrating excellence of UX? And so to roll back to a little psychology research, if we think about what's required to make new synapses in our brain, to make new connections, develop new habits that we feel confident, we feel safe, right? We don't have the hand-raising, stressful experience of those wallet interactions. It takes about 400 repetitions to generate that new synapse and to feel comfortable and confident in that new behavior. Now, would anyone like to guess how many repetitions it takes when you add fun? Little injection of dopamine, little laughter, little joy. All right, gaming PhD, what's the difference? 400 repetitions versus how many if you're playing?
No clue.
12.
Whoa.
12. So in terms of time, confidence, risk management, and community engagement, having empathy for the experience of your audience and speaking to them in a way that they can receive where they are, whether that's inside their head or in a suit, that can shortcut the cost of onboarding and the time and complexity of that progressive management that you described earlier.
Okay, but let's be serious. Like, the second I start double checking which wallet I'm sending my funds to, I've lost all my money. Like, it's for sure bad, and you should stay scared for the whole rest of your life, so you should never have fun making a transaction. That's what I'm learning. And
So-
it's only 12 times.
So that's a question though. Have you ever hearted a transaction on Venmo?
I'm a Canadian, so I don't have fun.
Oh, there you go. So what I'm hearing though here is we have a legacy of anxiety around money in our culture, right? And we feel that the best way to honor and protect those resources is to maintain the highest anxiety possible. Y'all, that sounds stressful in a world where the default is supposed to be a public settlement layer that we can all engage with, and all of our actions are supposed to inform our, financial capabilities, or at least we're building the structure to do so. So, maybe a question for you guys: should financial transactions induce stress in the user as a form of safety, or do we design for simplicity and psychological safety to keep people in our apps? What's your take? Ryan, what do you think?
Well, honestly, I think it really depends on what kind of user you're targeting, right? Like, I as much as I think I'm well versed, I got scammed a couple times as well. So I think it really depends on how you want your users to perceive the app, like what they're interacting. Specifically, are they really putting themselves into some kind of danger shoes? And yeah, I think I'm probably more on the user should be scared all the time kind of vibe.
I actually have a quick question for the audience, quick poll. Of the people who flew here, how many of you booked your flight on a laptop? And then let's go laptop first, and then plane and phone second. So can we do laptop? And then can we do phone? Wow, that's shockingly closer than I thought. Basically, societally, the massive majority of purchases that are considered like big purchases are over $250 are usually done on a laptop because you want to feel nervous about like hitting buttons, whereas a phone makes it so easy where like you can Venmo $1,000 and not realize that you actually just lost $1,000. So I think for our broader industry, when it comes to onboarding mass consumers, which is sort of the idea of all of this, one of the things to avoid is just the idea of like hacks and any security breaches in general. So I actually err on a little bit of the side of Will over there that I think the double checking and all that should be relatively important. Having said that, there are a lot of use cases on blockchain that don't require financial layers or transactions. And that I'm fully with Evan on, where that should be like, you should never feel weird about just trying to log into something. That's absolutely ludicrous.
Right, well, because I used to worry that signing a message might actually accidentally sign a transaction until I learned about all kinds of protective layers that happen in the back end that prevent that from actually occurring. But you could get totally scammed on the front end while signing something horrible if you were really in a sketchy place. But to be fair to the Web2 UX people, like when I bought a car recently, like when I wired $40,000, I'm double checking everything too. Like,
exactly.
That's not a Web3 problem. It's scary as shit.
Yeah, I think financial transactions in general are always something that people should double check, just to be confident on. I think the thing you alluded to about signing a message, thinking that that's the same as signing a transaction, that's a broader commentary on your industry for not doing a good enough job of educating people on the differences of those types of things. So I actually fully agree with Evan that the education component should be a little bit more fun than like esoteric in a lot of ways where people don't really understand it.
I think another very interesting point here when we're talking about these anxieties that comes with sending sums of money is that some of it is exacerbated by, the self-custodial nature of crypto, where if you fuck up a transaction, that's it, it's gone forever. So yeah, it's funny seeing how us finding solutions to these problems trends toward just more learnings from Web2. So I guess the real question here is how do we solve these problems, give a Web2 UX, but also maintain the advantages of Web3 and crypto, which is a very tough nut to crack. So I'm glad these people are trying to do something so I can sit here and eat.
Yeah, actually, Will, not to poach your job, but I had a quick question for Evan. One of the things that I constantly hear from, I hate the term, but normies or people who haven't yet bought crypto, is they get really scared of the idea of not having a phone number to call if they forget their password or write down something. How do you balance that between or how do you view it, especially given you're in Switzerland with all the bankers recently, on decentralization versus having some sort of authority who you can rely on in some ways?
The logical conclusion of decentralization is that we are all living alone on a windswept crag in a hut we built ourselves, growing our own vegetables, not talking to anyone, communicating only with our Starlink, only using products where we mined the materials ourselves, only using code that we wrote and compiled ourselves. And unless we're doing that, we are trusting someone else with every aspect of our day. Whether it's the food we eat, the transportation we take, the app that we use, and the phone that we use to call our moms. And so the arbitrary decision that certain capabilities require hyper-decentralization but not others is kind of wild. It's like complaining about the ethics of a supply chain for your food while you're wearing clothing that came from an unethical supply chain, right? There's a lot of pick and choosing there. So I think almost the nearly religious dogma and cultural cult that brought us all to this party is very different than the practical reality of humans who are just trying to do their thing, right? Nobody came to crypto to start at step 0 of our user journey. They were already in the middle of their own journey as a person. They had plans today. They're just trying to look good to their boss, hang out with their friends, and do what they like with the time and resources that they have. And so, most people don't talk about like VoIP or TCP/IP when they get on a Zoom call. So why would we discuss the guts of the underlying protocol when we're just trying to use an app to do a thing we were going to do anyway? I think the technical fetish of so much of our work is just a way that, we get off on being smart at each other. Very, very chill, very cool, respect and love that. However, when it comes to meeting people where they are, we've got to empathize with what they were trying to do in their day already and help that happen faster, cheaper, more delightfully. So, to the extent that people are interested in how the sausage is made, they can read the documentation. But if you have to read docs to use an app, help us all.
Okay, great. So my next question is, since we're comparing Web3 to Web2 UX, what is the thing we have in Web2 that you wish Web3 would have? Like, what is the missing piece of the puzzle in your mind?
Okay, guys, there's a list right now that we all have in our heads that we haven't written down yet. It's a secret list, we don't talk about it, and it's the list of names of people we know and organizations we think are legit. So if you see Vitalik.eth, you see Coinbase, you see Kraken, you see various governments, maybe not, right? You start to recognize these are entities that are known. We've got a list of businesses, organizations, governments, individuals on chain that we can trust and we can build off of. But without a comprehensive list of who's out there, we have created one of the greatest discoverability problems of all time, right? We've pushed everyone to the edges. We've all become atomic units unto ourselves. And we all have the same problem being able to find each other and tell what's real, what's not, and who's who. So, at Disco, we think about this as, from a very basic level, just as we call it the phone book. But the concept of registries, of known entities, that's the only way that we can improve discoverability, because otherwise we just have infinite sets of keys, and the only way to find each other is going to be a suboptimal namespace where we run into issues like DNS squatting, or anyone can decide to nickname their keys however they would so desire. So without a reputation-based form of registries, whether that's something like ICANN or something like an actual phone book or something like a Facebook from your undergrad, right? Having select registries of entities is, I think, the only way that we can scale this discoverability. We have it in every aspect of Web2 where you've got multiple parties together, and we have basically none of them in a codified or useful form in Web3.
Adding on to Evan, so Cyber has been building this product called Link3 for the last 3 years. Probably you guys seen it, right, in a lot of the Twitter bios. And it does exactly what you're saying, right? Like, we want people to know that they're interacting with verified sources of information or the contacts or the websites. And on top of that, Link3 is doing a lot more things like verifying who's part of the organization, who has been interacting with each other. And in general, I just think Web2 social apps should all come to Web3, like with the additional benefits of definitely verifiability and definitely the monetization and direct transactions on chain. And that's what we're hoping for at Cyber.
Yeah, I think trust is like a big one that everybody sort of here has already echoed. The other two, kind of interesting. One of them is composability, which is weird because that was one of the biggest problems that Web3 was supposed to solve in the first place. But I mean, if there are like 10 popular apps and they're across different chains, we don't have the infra yet that unfortunately lets you just log in a very easy way for all of those. Which again is weird because that's one of the biggest things with Web3 was the ethos of that. And then I think the other one is, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but sort of like a more immersive, personalized experience. And right now everybody sort of has the same flat foot. And then the last one, similar to composability, is sort of a single sign-on access too.
I what I would love to see more in Web3, what we have in Web2, is a greater range and variety of subcultures and microcultures. I mean, already in crypto we have anarcho-capitalists, anarcho-socialists, lunar punks, solar punks, DeFi degens. But in Web2, this is like the plethora of subcultures is so much greater. This is probably just a function of the size of the industry. But why I'm so excited for this to emerge more in Web3 is because crypto allows us to make mechanism design much more explicit. So when we can experiment with much more explicit mechanism design and token incentives that encourage and nudge different kinds of behaviors in many new creative ways that we couldn't before, and coupling that with a lot of new subcultures, maybe new emergent subcultures as well, I think it's just going to be super fun and very interesting. And the new types of behaviors we'll see online will be pretty mind-blowing. So that's what I'm very excited for.
All right, thank you. And that's time for us. We've done our 30 minutes, so I'll give it over to the real moderator,